Welcome back to AM Joy. The woman sitting across from Richard Nixon in this rare Oval Office footage is Rose Mary Woods, Richard Nixon's devoted personal secretary of more than 20 years. Rose Mary Woods became a household name in 1973 when she initially took the blame for erasing part of the now infamous tapes that Nixon made of his conversations in the Oval Office using his secret recording system. Here she is demonstrating what became known as the Rose Mary Stretch. She claimed that she accidentally erased several minutes of the tapes when she pressed the record pedal on her transcription machine while stretching to answer the phone. Ultimately, the Watergate tapes did wind up in the hands of investigators and the media, including the one on which Nixon orders the CIA to tell the FBI to stop investigating Watergate. And we all know how the story ended. Nixon was ultimately forced to resign. So, is history repeating itself? Well, joining me now is one of the few people uniquely qualified to evaluate the Watergate comparison, John Dean, former White House counsel to Richard Nixon and friend of the show. All right, John, so you are quite famous for saying a certain phrase. This is cut to for my producers that I want to play back to you right now.
I began by telling the president that there was a cancer growing on the presidency, and if the cancer was not removed, the president himself would be killed by it.
So you said that famous phrase, that looking like young and spry in that photo, John Dean. Do you feel that we are at the cancer on the presidency stage with Donald Trump?
It's not quite parallel at this point. What happened is that was late in the game. That was 8 months into Watergate after the arrest had occurred. Nixon was not telling anybody how deeply he was really involved. I didn't know, and I was trying to warn him at that point that he better end this cover-up or it was going to end his presidency. Yeah. Very frustrating. I think that's the morning I met Richard Nixon because he had an answer for every problem I raised, and I now today know he was deeply involved in the cover-up.
Yeah, and you have, you know, just to give people the context of it, you have basically the job that Don McGahn has now. Don McGahn, I might be pronouncing his name wrong.
Right.
So you would have been in the position of the guy who Sally Yates came to and said, hold on a second, the guy you've got installed as national security advisor is potentially subject to blackmail. If you were White House counsel, if you were in the Don McGahn position, is that something that you would walk right into the Oval Office and tell the president and the vice president?
It is, and I'm sure that that's what was done. The role of the White House counsel has changed a little bit because of Watergate. When I was there were really no rules of ethics that had been established since Watergate, and because of Watergate, the American Bar Association set out a standard of model conduct and responsibility for lawyers. And today, it's clear the White House counsel doesn't represent the man who is in the Oval Office, it represents the office itself. And that's a little bit of a different relationship. Yeah. So the White House counsel really is looking out for the well-being of the office of the president, not necessarily the man who occupies the office.
Yeah, there are a lot of differences. I mean, the Nixon's personal secretary that we talked about at the top, you know, this is a position of somebody who she seemed to know in a lot of ways everything that was going on there, but it was sort of interesting that he threw her under the bus.
Joy, they never did find out exactly who did that. A few years ago, a friend of mine did some deep research, found a guy who was the original repairman for that machine, which was a unique, and said it was not possible for Rose Mary Woods to have erased, as she said. Yeah. Because of Nixon's resignation, they never completed the investigation, but he was scheduled to testify.
Yeah, and unfortunately she passed away many years ago, so yeah, it's a mystery that seems never to be solved. Some of the other differences, and I think you've been very careful about not allowing there to be these sort of overdrawn comparisons to Richard Nixon. As Richard Painter said in the last segment, Richard Nixon didn't have the KGB break into the Watergate Hotel and take that information, which is a huge difference. But another difference here was tweeted out, interestingly enough, by the Nixon Presidential Library. And it said that James Comey, I'm sorry, fun fact, President Nixon never fired the director of the FBI. He did fire the guy who was investigating him, however. And do you think that firing Jim Comey is the equivalent sort of obstruction of justice that we saw with Nixon?
I don't, not at this stage. What he's done with Comey, he had certainly the power to do. Nixon also had the power to remove the special prosecutor. But what the difference being is that Archibald Cox was doing things that deliberately the president had asked he not do. Right. In other words, stop pursuing the tapes. Don't go to court over the tapes. Nixon wanted to protect his tapes. Comey has not been given any instruction to stop the investigation. In fact, Trump, with his Lester Holt interview, said, "I welcome the investigation."
Yeah.
Well, none of us believe that, but that's a good public stance. So there are some differences, and it's really the clumsiness with which it's all being handled and sort of the brutality that has made it reminiscent of Watergate.
Yeah, you mentioned Archibald Cox. I think a lot of people, just sort of who weren't, lucid during that time or alive during that time don't remember it. I want to play a little bit of Archibald Cox. He held a press conference in October of 1973. Let's just, so we can hear him talk. This is him.
What I see as principle could be vanity. I hope not. In the end, I decided that I had to try to stick by what I thought was right.
You know, it's interesting that that quote sounds like a lot of what Jim Comey could say, right? A lot of people see him as sort of vainglorious in a lot of ways and sort of self-serving. It's interesting, that parallel between the sort of two people who see themselves as principled investigators.
Both very independent men who were comfortable with themselves, knew their role, and were pursuing their roles. I don't think we've heard the end of Comey. What's happened is Trump has made him into a potential key witness.
Yeah.
I mean, what happened at that dinner in January that Trump now says he taped or hinted he taped? I don't believe that, but if he did, I think it was something he did on his smartphone.
Yeah.
And I think Comey would like that tape out.
Yeah. He said he hopes there are tapes through friends.
Yes.
One last thing, and you've written a lot about, you wrote a book that I still think is essential reading called Conservatives Without Conscience, where you really talked about sort of your own break with, what the Republican Party of today, of what it's become. And, James Fallows, who was a young reporter during Watergate, wrote what I think is one of the must-reads this week about this scandal. And he wrote this. He said, on the merits, this era's Republican president has done more to justify investigation than Richard Nixon did. Yet this era's Republican senators and members of Congress have cravenly done far less. They have stuck with Trump where it counts, in votes. And since Comey's firing, they've been stunning in their silence. What do you make of what seems to be the incredible hesitancy of Republicans in the House and the Senate to really vigorously go after what is clearly foreign interference in an American election?
Yeah, I read that piece by Fallows in the Atlantic. It was a good piece, and he was 24 years old at the time, and it was all eye-opening to him. Today, what's happening in the polls this morning show that Trump really is not annoying his base, and as a result of that, the Republicans don't know quite what to do. They're not going to act until he starts losing his support, which is remaining pretty steady. Now, how these people can tolerate and accept whatever he does and the way he's doing it, I find pretty amazing. But until they work that out, he's got support. As long as he's got support, Republicans are not going to touch him.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. You sort of wish there were.
It's amazing.
You wish there were. You look for heroes and you find none, and that is what is so sad. John Dean, you with being an exception, because you're terrific, and we really always appreciate talking to you. Thank you, sir.
I always enjoy it with you, Joy.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And up next, a friendly reminder: Republicans are still trying to destroy health care. Stay with us.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.